Welcome to the Ultimate Filmmaking and Videography course. This course is going to be multiple episodes for free uploaded on YouTube. I'm not going to sell you anything and there won't be any paywalls to continue this course. In today's episode, we're going to discuss exposure, which is one of the most important fundamentals that you need to master if you're going to shoot video or photos. We will discuss ISO, shutter angle or shutter speed, and aperture, and how each one of them affect your video. And because this workshop is free, I want you to like this video, comment down below what you want to know about next, and subscribe to the channel because we are uploading every single week. There are courses behind the scenes and show you what I'm working in real life. Let's start with the first episode, starting with aperture. Aperture affects the amount of light that hits the sensor. There are a couple of blades inside of the lens that can be narrowed down or opened up to let the light into your camera. Aperture is measured in f-stops and t-stops. There is going to be a future video that compares both of them, but in today's episode, we're going to refer to it as f-stop. A wide aperture has a small f-stop or a small number. If we say f1 or f2 or f2.8 up to, let's say, f3.5, f4, this is a wide aperture. Starting from 3.5 and going up, this is a narrow aperture. A wide aperture will allow more light into the sensor, which will give you a brighter image. It won't just give you a brighter image, but it will also give you a shallow depth of field. A shallow depth of field is the blurriness behind the subject that you're shooting. So if you see a blurry background like this one, this is a shallow depth of field. While when shooting with a narrow aperture like f4, f8, f11 or f16, you will see everything in the background clearly. There won't be any blurriness. This is called a deep depth of field. A deeper depth of field will assure that everything's in focus, but it won't be as cinematic. A standard aperture in the market right now is f2.8. You'd see a lot of lenses go from f2.8 to f4, let's say. These are going to be zoom lenses. On prime lenses, which we will explain in a later video, you can find lenses up to f1, f1.2, 1.4, 1.8, or f2, and going up. Now, which one to use in which situation? If you have low light, you should always be careful when using wide apertures, because if you're using a manual focus lens, or if you're using an autofocus system that you do not trust, you might lose focus when the camera just focuses on the nose or on the microphone, or wherever it focuses other than the eyes. If you don't trust the autofocus, or if you're using a gimbal, you might need a narrow depth of field. Let's say f2.8, f4, or even f5.6. But you should always compensate for the loss of light that you will have when you narrow down your aperture. The second one would be shutter speed or shutter angle. This controls how much motion blur there is in your image. We've always heard filmmakers talking about the 180-degree shutter rule, which means the shutter speed should be twice the frame rate. So if we're shooting at 25 FPS, the shutter speed should be 1/50. If we're shooting at 100 FPS, the shutter would be 1/200, and so forth and so on. This is how you calculate your shutter speed. If you decrease the number, let's say 1/1000, it would capture the motion faster than 1/150, which will result in less motion blur. If we shoot at 1/25, it will give us more motion blur. The natural way is keeping the shutter speed double the frame rate. Now, if we want to speak in angle terms, we have 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 360. All of these degrees can be switched to numbers. So if we set our camera to 180 degrees, it will always keep the shutter speed double the frame rate. This is why film cameras or video cameras can help us to keep the shutter speed exactly double the frame rate while we change the frame rate when we're shooting. So if you're shooting 24 FPS or 25 FPS and the director says we need a slow motion shot, let's shoot at 100 FPS, and we set our camera to 180-degree rule, it will automatically change the shutter speed from 1/50 to 1/200. This can help us speed the process and ensure a natural motion blur. I'm not going to bother you of using it in photography. There are a lot of courses online of how to use it in photography, but this is the way we use it in video. We always keep the shutter speed double the frame rate. If we want to create more motion blur in our shot, we can go down to 90 degrees, let's say, or 45 degrees. If we want to create less motion blur, we can go up to 360 degrees. Anything between 180 and 360 will create less motion blur. Anything between 45 or 0, if we want to say, and 180 degrees will create more motion blur. The ISO is the last thing we're going to change. People would say the ISO is the last thing to change, but in video, things are different. So by the end of this video, I'm going to tell you how each one of them affects the other one and how to set them in a different way in video from photography. ISO usually controls how noisy your images are. Whenever you buy a new camera, you set it to auto and you go to shoot wherever you want inside your place. You're shooting the plant, you're shooting your dog, and you see a noisy image coming out of your camera and you say, I bought the worst camera ever. That's what happened with me in 2016, and I thought that I was scammed, but it was not. I just didn't know how to use my camera. When you set your ISO to whatever number, it will result in either more or less noise. Noise is the small particles that you see in your image. On your phone, you don't usually see them because there are noise reduction systems inside of your phone. You can reduce the noise in post-production, but we don't want that. We want a clean image coming out of our cameras. ISO controls the exposure digitally. When we increase the ISO, it will result in more noise in the image. Noise is the small particles that you see in the image whenever you shoot in low light situations or whenever you don't have enough light in your shot. It is a natural thing in every digital image, so it's okay to be there. But we try to reduce it as much as possible by setting the right ISO. Increasing the ISO in your camera will result in similar results, not always, but most of the time, as changing it in post-production. So if you increase the ISO in your camera or increase the exposure in post-production, it will result in the same amount of noise. That depends on the sensor size and the pixel sizes in the sensor itself and the sensor type. There are a lot of factors that control how much noise will be in your image. In photography, we've learned that you should set your ISO to the lowest number. So if the lowest amount of ISO is 100, you should set it always to 100, or the least amount of ISO if you want to shoot in low light. And they would always tell us, don't go over 800 or 1000. If you shot on 1600 on a cropped frame camera, it will be a nightmare for you. Nowadays, we have dual base ISOs, and there are high numbers that we can choose. Base ISOs usually differs from one camera to another. So whenever you're buying a camera, you should always know what's the base ISO for this camera. Depending on your work, you would choose a camera that suits you. So I shoot usually in low light. I shoot events, documentaries. I cannot control the light. I cannot have lighting with me wherever I go. I would prefer to have something that goes up to 12,800, which is the highest base ISO that you can find in the market right now. I chose the ZVE1, the FX3, the FX6. This sensor can go up to 12,800. If I would shoot something indoors, I can use a Red Komodo, which is a cropped frame camera that has a base ISO of 800, but I can have controlled lighting with it. Now, base ISOs are the cleanest numbers that you should choose. You should always stick to them. Do not shoot over your base ISOs. I have an ISO of 640 and 12,800 on my camera. I'm shooting right now at 640. If I go below that, it's okay, but I would lose on dynamic range, which is something that we're going to discuss later in the video. But if we want to have the best image, the best dynamic range, no noise, we should go with the base ISO. On a side note, there's nothing called no noise in digital videography or photography. There will always be noise. This is the electrical parts in the sensor. I don't know if I'm explaining that right or wrong, but these are going to be there because digital sensors have noise ratios in them. The last part that I want to mention in this video, although it doesn't have anything to do with exposure triangle, but you should know it in the fundamentals, which is frame rates. Frame rates are the amount of images per second that your camera can take. Let's say you set it to 24 frames per second. It will take 24 continuous images each second. It will combine them together and show them to you in a video format. If we set it to 60 frames per second, it will show you 60 images per second video format. Now, the natural frame rate that we watch movies in and we watch television in is 24 frames per second. For TV and television and news, we can also see sometimes 30 frames per second, depending on the area. The standard numbers are 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, 100, and 120 frames per second. Now we can divide them into separate, let's say, regions. The first region, which is the United States, I don't know if there are any other countries, I'll mention them here. The first region, the United States, uses NTSC. NTSC and all the other regions uses PAL. These are different frequencies that these countries operate in. These are very, very important for you if you're going to shoot in different countries, because if you are in a PAL region, you cannot use the NTSC frame rates. So the NTSC frame rates are 24, 30, 60, and 120, and if you can go up to 240 or 480 or whatever you want. The PAL region shoots in 25, 50, and 100 FPS. Because you want to set your shutter speed double the frame rate, you need to have 1/50, 1/100, or 1/200 in PAL regions. You need to have 1/48, 1/96, and 1/240 if you want 120 FPS. This number will ensure that you don't have any flicker in your image. If you're shooting with city lights or in some home, these lights will cause flickering in your image. Setting the right shutter angle or shutter speed will ensure that you don't have these flickers or these black bars in your image. That's why we need to set the frame rate, the shutter speed first thing. Whenever we go to a shoot, we know that we're shooting normal. We're not shooting any slow motion shots. We will set the frame rate to 24 or 25 FPS. If we have a slow motion shot, we can shoot 50 FPS or 60 FPS and slow it down in post to 24 or 25 FPS. That's how we can make a slow motion shot. If we want to get that without flickering, we want to have the right settings. So we set the frame rate, then we set the shutter angle or shutter speed, and we keep them locked. Then we set the base ISO. If we're shooting in low light, we might need to go up to the second base ISO, which will give us the same result as the first base ISO noise-wise. I'm not speaking about light-wise. Exposure-wise, you're going to have a brighter image because you're going up with the ISO number. If you choose the low base ISO or the first base ISO, you'll have a darker image and the same amount of noise. I'm going to explain all of this base ISO thing in a different video. Make sure to follow us on Instagram because we have a short uploaded there about this thing. So if you want to learn it, just go to our Instagram account, follow us, and watch the video. After setting your base ISO, your shutter angle or shutter speed, and your frame rate, you should control your aperture. If you have a lens that goes as wide as 1.2 or 1.4, set it as wide as possible. This is going to be depending on the situation you have, but you should know that this will result in a brighter image. So you need to compensate with something else like the ISO or shutter angle. If you have the ISO locked at, let's say 800, and that's your base ISO, you can't go lower, and the director is refusing to change their mind to get a deeper depth of field and not have all the blurry and fancy lights in the back, you can use one last resort, which is ND filters. ND filters are like sunglasses to your camera. This is an ND filter pouch. It has all the NDs that I use. These are NDs, these are small. This is for iPhone. But these NDs are like sunglasses to your camera. So if I put them in front of my camera, you'd see a darker image. If I remove them, you'd see the normal image. If I increase the ISO to numbers that are very high, let me try to do it. If we control the light from here and we increase the ISO, let's say to, 25,600, and we put the glasses, you see the normal lighting that we had before. If we remove it, you can see the normal exposure inside of the ND filter. That's why it's like sunglasses to your camera. Now I'll bring it back to the base ISO that we had and turn that off. This is what ND filters are. These are very helpful when you have a specialty shot, when you need a wide aperture, when you're shooting outdoors, you cannot control the light, you cannot do anything about it, you use ND filters. Some people would change the shutter angle or shutter speed. I'm one of the guilty people that do that. Whenever I'm shooting an event, I don't mind changing the shutter angle or shutter speed to get the perfect exposure if I don't have NDs with me. Whenever I started shooting, I couldn't afford to have ND filters, so I used to change the shutter speed. Sometimes you would forget them. The average viewer would not notice that you changed the shutter speed. But if we're talking professionally, it's unprofessional to do that. Especially if you have lights that flicker, you cannot do that. It's not a choice. So buying a set of good ND filters can be beneficial for you, especially when starting out. This is everything you need to know about exposure triangle. But how can we know if our exposure is right on our camera? This is going to be a separate episode talking about histograms, waveforms, false colors, and everything that you need to know to set the right exposure. You might ask me, can I just set it on the screen that I see it? Like I can see that this is a good exposure on the screen. Yes, you can. And I do it 90% of the time. But sometimes if you're not sure about your shot or you're not sure about your exposure, these tools can ensure that your shot is well exposed. This is going to be the end of our first episode. If you want to know how to set the right exposure in your camera using tools like histogram, waveform, and false color, you can watch the second episode in the playlist. We're going to upload them weekly, so subscribe to see the next episodes. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and comment down below what you want to know about next, and I'll see you in the next one.